I really wish most people could try it. I really wish most people could try Skyline just to be able to have their senses wrecked because you walk into a spot, you swear up and down it's about to be chili. What you know is chili, and then all of a sudden, your palate tastes something kind of sweet, not quite any kind of herbs or like hardiness to it. It's got this watery look, and then when it lays on the actual coney, it's like, I don't know, dog. I don't know about this. And I really wish I had the treat of serving it to everyone just so they could just be thrown off. It would be amazing to watch.
Well, count me in if I'm ever in the area.
All right, I'm counting on you, Bill.
All right, everybody. Welcome to episode 16 of the Fantasy Timeline. I'm Josh at Real Fantasy TL. I'm with my main man, Bill at Super Duper Flex. Bill, how you doing?
Doing good. Just getting over a little cold or whatever you want to call it that everybody's been getting this time of year. So hopefully I make it through the session without having to excuse myself.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you are on the mend, that you're getting better. I wanted to go live a little bit early so you could hear our guest talk about one of his favorite foods, Skyline Chili, and give that description of it. You guys were listening to it, so I know you heard just how great it sounds. It's my main man from the Open Bar and various other projects, J Mike. How you doing, J Mike?
Listen, I was great until you said Skyline was my favorite. Now I'm gonna send my attorney your way for slander and libel and everything else that I can, because you can't just go spreading these kinds of rumors about me on these streets, man. I got a reputation to uphold in this community, Josh. No,
J Mike does have a reputation. Yeah. I would never slander it. He is not endorsed by Skyline Chili. As he said before we went live, don't put that evil on him because he does not want any parts of it. But we go from something that is called chili to
something saucy.
Yeah, to something that is called a job interview for college athletes ready to go into the NFL. So the combine is here, and I'm sure you guys have been seeing it all over Twitter. Heights, weights, interviews have been posted all over Twitter. Have you guys seen anything that's caught your eye right now? J Mike, I'll start with you.
I've only been able to catch some so far. The main thing that caught my eye, this time of year does really strange things to someone who's a big dynasty, big fan of dynasty. You really want action, you want things to happen, and you recognize that a lot of the process in Indianapolis is overstated. And so one of the things that I did while at work during some of my not so busy times, I made a spreadsheet of everyone, all the skill players at the combine, and their heights, weights, hand sizes, all these things. Now, why would I do that, you ask? I don't have a great answer. But in doing so, one of the weirdest things I saw, Eno Benjamin, and I tweeted about this yesterday.
Saw that.
Eno Benjamin weighed in, I believe, at the Senior Bowl at 195 pounds. Like, oh man, a little bit disappointing. We thought he'd be bigger. We hope, blah, blah, blah. He weighs in at the combine at 207 pounds, and it was barely a month later. I mean, I don't know if you're just going ham on Snickers. I don't know if you have an Aquafina endorsement. I don't know what Eno's thing is right now, but I find it interesting that a man can put on 12 pounds in the span of a month and there not be some sort of chicanery going on.
Well, J Mike, obviously you've never sat down to dinner with me because I feel like I could put down 12 pounds in a month if so motivated. A couple Philly cheesesteaks, not Skyline Chili, but a couple of Philly cheesesteaks a day, I'll be 12 pounds in no time. But yeah, I saw your tweet, and that's really interesting because, he was supposed to be a smaller guy, and we were probably all assuming that he was going to run rather quickly. I'll be curious to see if this extra weight slows him down a little bit and how the community will perceive that. Bill, what do you think?
Yeah, I think he drank a lot of water, right? Like, because isn't a gallon of water like 8 pounds? So, like, couldn't you just, like, if you really want to show weight, just drink a bunch of water right before you got on the scale? Like, I mean, isn't that just a trick that they would always do for weight? And then you just piss it out and then you're good?
Well, yeah, I know. I used to wrestle, and I know that would be a big thing, would be just to drink tons of water in the couple of days leading up to a weigh-in if you needed to weigh more than you currently did. And
Right.
then after weigh-in, you would proceed to sweat it all out instantly. But yeah, I mean, I'm very curious to see how a lot of these guys who are adding weight, cutting weight, doing all kinds of things. The Joe Burrow tweet was pretty funny after his hands came in at 9 inches. I don't remember the tweet word for word, but he pretty much said, I'll have to retire due to the fact that the ball will be falling out of my tiny hands. Please think of me at this time. That's the rough remembrance of it, which I thought was a good way to do Twitter. So
Sure. And it was pretty cool that Mahomes even retweeted it and commented about, I guess Mahomes only has like 9.25 inch or something like that hands. So, I mean, it's not like that size hand is, destined for failure. So it's kind of funny just how people react to, what their expectations are for, people's, hand size or whatever they're going to run. I mean, I get it within a range, but like, I mean, as long as he doesn't have like 7-inch hands, I think you're good.
And can we think about how little we think of Jake Fromm in the fact that his hands were I shouldn't say much smaller. His hands were smaller than Joe Burrow's, and nobody raised one fuss about it one bit. I mean, we must really, as a community, just kicking Fromm to the curb. Let me pull up my handy dandy chart here, all my deep research here. So Jake Fromm had 8 7/8 inch hands, and nobody. I mean, here I go saying nobody. I don't know if anyone caught that or threw that out, but I find that really interesting.
I didn't see that, but except for maybe a very small minority of just football fans in general, does anyone think Jake Fromm is more than a backup? I mean, I'm sure there are probably a handful of people that think he can be a starter in the league, but like you said, I think that's one of the reasons why that kind of went under the radar, because there aren't too many people expecting much from him as we sit here right now.
I mean, he's not up on the top of my list, at least based on what I was looking at. I think he's number 6 on my quarterback rankings so far. So,
yeah.
I mean, it's not like I expect him to be anything aside from like there you go. Jake Chad Pennington Fromm. Our friend Zach Reed is responding.
Big bro.
Hey, Chad Pennington was good when he was in Gotham, and then he went down south like all the old people do to Miami, and kind of fell off once he went down there. He was an okay quarterback with the Jets.
I liked him at Marshall.
I agree with that. I think I think the Jets did too. They got some good years out of him, or maybe some okay years, we'll say. Maybe not good, but
yeah, nah.
Okay.
It's kind of hard not to like the quarterback that's throwing to Randy Moss. Just gonna throw that out.
I mean, that's valid.
Marshall.
just launch it. Yep.
Right.
Hey, he had Wayne Corbett with the Jets. He had some talented players in New York. Don't disparage the good name of Wayne Corbett.
What do you have, like I haven't even thought about him in so long. How many years did he have that were decent? Like 2?
Wayne Corbett or Chad Pennington?
Sure. Wayne Corbett. Wayne Corbett.
Both.
I'm looking at Wayne Corbett right now. Holy shit, he had 7,300 receiving yards.
Yeah, he was a stud.
Nah. So he had 1 year of over 1,000 yards. He just had a
Yeah.
long career of 700 to 900 yards.
We're being real liberal with that use of the word stud there, Josh. Wayne Corbett, stud, household name.
You'd think that he was on ESPN, like, talking to one of your boys. Like, I won't even say their names because those guys are like cartoon characters. What are those talk hosts?
Listen,
what are those guys' names?
Booger and I could have a real in-depth conversation about Wayne Corbett. All right, you leave that man alone.
It must be my cough syrup effing me up.
Sipping on that scissor, Bill.
The scissor. What is
so,
that guy's name?
So we all kind of picked out something we thought was interesting from the combine, and we'll go from the combine to, well, I guess we'll stay in the combine because technically both of the next 2 news points came from things that were said or overheard at the combine. Matt Rule in a press conference in Indy said that Cam is the guy for next year. Are you buying it, or do you think this is one of those patented NFL smokescreens?
One of the questions that I would be asking is, even if that is the case, because I do, I'm a big fan of the Carolina group moving forward. I like what I think Matt Rule is going to do with the team. I like the pieces in Carolina, and I like all of that. One of the questions that I have is, what Cam Newton am I getting? Am I getting the old Cam Newton, or am I getting old Cam Newton? I like Cam Newton a ton. He's absolutely fantastic for fantasy. He's done great things for our teams. All that's wonderful. The price of Cam Newton right now obviously probably took a little bit of a bump. So if you're looking to sell him, I'd imagine that you're not getting, the old Cam Newton value for him. But for me and mine, I'm not upset with sniffing around to see what Cam Newton's about. Because remember, at this point, Cam Newton, 30-year-old quarterback, we're a couple months away from him being 31, and I don't remember what his contract looks like, but I don't think they have much left on the contract regardless. So you're playing a game of chicken if you do want to take Cam Newton on your team, or if you want to keep riding with him, because we don't know what the foot looks like. We don't know how healthy he's going to be. We don't know if the role of the offense is going to continue to look the way that it did when he was crushing things. So I don't have a great gauge on Cam Newton, and I'm not necessarily trying to my best to acquire him, but I'm not mad at trying to sniff around to see what it's about.
What are you paying?
You know what? I was just about to look up ADP to see what life around Cam Newton looks like, because go for it.
J. Mike.
Well, let me just provide a little bit of information with the contract. 2020, he is getting $21 million, and he has $2 million in dead cap, and then he's a free agent. So he has 1 year left on his contract.
So, I actually might be higher on Cam than maybe some other people, and this is why. I think the Matt Rule signing, or bringing Matt Rule in as the head coach, is going to do a lot for Carolina. He's kind of proven that he is going to work with what he has and not try to fit square pegs into round holes. So I think if he sees Cam in training camp or in preseason and sees that he's a little bit slower or a little bit older, old Cam Newton, as J. Mike just said, I think he's going to craft an offense around making sure that Cam isn't running as much and is getting the ball out of his hand quickly. And if, Cam Newton heals that foot up and he's looking good and he's running around, I think he's going to craft an offense around getting Cam out there somewhat and getting him running. I think the coaching situation, and Zach just said Joe Brady here, he's going to heal all in Carolina. I think those two guys working together are going to craft an offense around Cam, whether he's the old Cam Newton or just old Cam Newton. So
I don't know. I think this is just a smoke screen for them, to be honest with you. I think they're waiting until he's fully healthy, and they got to say that because they can't do anything with him yet anyway, because he's probably not healthy enough for them to make a move. So I think it's a smoke screen. But that doesn't mean that I don't think he has value. So speaking dynasty wise, I was just in a dispersal and I grabbed him, and it was like in the 7th round of Superflex. So
wow.
What quarterbacks went around him? Because I've got DLF ADP pulled up. I'm curious. Do you have any idea of where, like, what other guys went in that range?
I'll probably have to pull up that spreadsheet.
Okay.
But yeah, go ahead and do what you're gonna do, and I'll pull it up.
Yeah, so looking at DLF ADP for February, and again, this is probably, most of this data was probably compiled before the comments about Cam Newton being the guy in Carolina. So with that being said, Cam Newton, February ADP, quarterback number 24. He's sandwiched exactly between Drew Brees and Drew Lock, right above him, or right ahead of him, I should say. And lower or later in ADP, Ryan Tannehill, Taysom Hill. So with that said, I like Cam Newton way better than quarterback 24 if he's in Carolina. That's without question. The question is, how much higher do you push him? I like him. I think I'd want him over Kirk Cousins, Jimmy G, Matthew Stafford's down here at 19. Man, that feels low.
Criminal.
Let me ask you guys this: Sam Darnold or Cam Newton?
Cam.
I'm probably taking. I'm taking Darnold. It's just a matter of I'd rather take a guy I know I'm going to get at least for 3 more years and potentially longer. That's kind of how I play with my quarterbacks. I mean, if it's the same price, I'm probably going Darnold every time.
So let me ask this, Bill. Does that mean that your confidence in Darnold is pretty high given the Gase factor?
No. My it just means that I haven't seen anything from Cam in the last 2.5 years. And granted, yes, he's been injured, but that we still don't know how he is, if he's ever going to be back from his injury. And so I don't have a lot of confidence that, Cam's going to be getting. I see him bouncing around maybe to a few teams. I mean, he might end up being the old Cam again, but regardless, so much of his game was based on the run game. And just as he ages, that's going to start, deteriorating. So, I mean, I don't know how confident I have in Cam being a top quarterback. I'd rather grab a guy that I could potentially have as my QB2 for the next decade. And that's just kind of how I mean, he may not also, but I know I'm going to get 3 more years out of him.
So basically you feel better about the hope of Darnold versus Cam bouncing back to be who he was.
Yeah, I don't have any expectations of Cam being like a top 8 quarterback again.
So Josh, with you wanting to take him ahead of Sam, that vaults you all the way up to QB 16, just as FYI, right behind Jared Goff. Jared Goff or Cam Newton?
Goff.
Okay, so there's your line.
So here's the quarterbacks that went around him. So it went Cousins, then Rodgers, then Tannehill, then Cam.
Wow.
And then
Interesting.
Then we ran into, that was like the last decent quarterback in the dispersal. It was a 5-team dispersal. Bridgewater was the next guy taken like a long way back. So yeah, he was taken. I've seen this in a lot of drafts actually, is Rodgers plummeting. So I think he's actually, I mean, people still want to get Rodgers, QB 6 prices, but I've noticed in startups and in this dispersal, Rodgers has fallen really far. Rodgers was the 19th quarterback taken in a startup I did this year.
Wow.
That's super interesting.
So people, in startups, people always want the young guys. They want to just shore up a guy they think they're going to have for the next decade. So you see these older guys just fall and fall. So, I mean, if you want to roll the dice and just pick a bunch of old quarterbacks at the end, you're going to end up with a stud team. I mean, you're still going to have Rodgers, I would imagine, for at least 3 more years. So, and at that price, you're getting arguably a QB1 for the next 3 years, I would think.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Prices on guys like Stafford and Rodgers, who, they've put up stats, and injuries have taken some of that away. But I feel like the fall for some of these guys, they just get this perception that they're not good or they're old, and it kind of then sticks with them, and they never rebound, and that's where you get those values. I always seem to end up with Matt Stafford in Superflex leagues because his value is just so depressed, and the last couple of years injuries have derailed him, and you deal with that. But when he's out there, he's putting up pretty good numbers. But we'll go from quarterbacks that we think are old to a quarterback that is actually pretty old. Phillip Rivers. So there are a lot of rumors, people overhearing conversations that the Colts would be interested in bringing in Phillip Rivers as their starting quarterback. How do you guys feel about that? And does that do anything to his fantasy and dynasty value?
I mean, I think his value is what it is. It's not going to ever go up or down anymore. I mean, the only reason it's going to go up a little bit is because we think he might play for a team next year. I mean, it's interesting because that team is kind of built on the short passes, So, I mean, I guess I just don't see anything left in Rivers personally, but I mean, I trust that management so much that I feel like he would do well there. I mean, if I can get him for cheap and he's my 3rd or 4th quarterback for the year, I mean, I'm cool doing that, but I'm not so excited about it that I'm going to, go out and acquire him. What do you think, J. Mike?
I think one of the things that I find interesting about Phillip Rivers' play last year, obviously, I feel like the San Diego offensive line tends to be a question mark from year to year. But he also showed many instances of just really poor decision making. And that, I think, is why I'm hesitant to buy in on him. Even if he gets the upgrade of the offensive line in Indianapolis, schematically, maybe they can do some things to really get the ball out of his hands quick. They've got a ton of speed on the outside with a guy like Paris Campbell, who I know is Zach's guy. What up, Zach? As well as T.Y. Hilton, or what's left of T.Y. Hilton, and even Zach Pascal. So Pascal, excuse me. So I'm not super intrigued at sniffing around Phillip Rivers unless you're contending and you're in the most dire of situations of needing a quarterback. I'm really not excited to see what Phillip Rivers has left, mainly because I don't know if his eyes are doing the same things that they did a couple seasons ago when I liked who he was and what he did. This season really just put me off Phillip Rivers in a major way.
Sure.
And even and apparently that's the community itself, because in this DLF ADP, golly, they had him all the way down here at QB 36. And to call back something from earlier in the episode, that's behind Jake Fromm. Just throwing that out there. People were taking Jake Fromm ahead of Phillip Rivers in this ADP.
So I'll play a little devil's advocate here, and Phillip Rivers in Indy is probably one of the few places, maybe the only place, that needs a upgrade at quarterback that Phillip Rivers would fit in well, just because a great offensive line, T.Y. Hilton, they have about $86 million in cap space. You know, I know everybody always has kind of a soft spot in their heart for Jack Doyle, but if they go out and grab Austin Hooper, or maybe they convince Hunter Henry to come over from LA with Rivers, it's a pretty good offense and a line that can kind of keep him upright and maybe lessen the bad decisions that he makes, because he actually has some time to throw the ball, may be good for him. Now, don't get me wrong. If he signs in Indy, I'm not going out tomorrow and trying to buy him for, a first round pick. But I think it's a guy that, you might be able to get at a discount if he signs in Indy. Maybe throw a third round pick at somebody who just had him last year and is completely disgusted with what they saw. And maybe you get a QB2 in a super flex league for a year or two and, right off into the sunset. Just something to think about. I mean, you guys had it right on the head. You're not giving up major capital to get Rivers, but I think if he ends up in Indy, you might be able to make a very friendly deal to get him on your team, and he could produce some QB2 stats.
Do you trust him as your QB2? Even if he lands in Indy, do you trust him as being your second guy in Superflex?
Well, here's the thing: if I'm making that deal, he's probably not my QB2.
There we go.
But he could put up QB2 stats. So
there we go. Yes.
And that's a deal where you might give up a third now to get him. He signs in Indy, and halfway through the season or right before playoff time, you sell him for a second because a team is QB needy, and you've kind of increased his value and gotten that out. And now you're sitting with a second round pick, and you gave up a third round pick to get the guy. I'm not going to sit here and say he's going to be QB 13. He's going to be QB 15, but I think in an offense that has a offensive line that's one of the best in the league that can protect him, I think it may be able to wash away some of the sins you saw last year. Not all of them, but some of them. So that's just my little devil's advocate for Phillip Rivers.
But I think that's incredibly valid, though, because like you just said, if you're paying for him and you're counting on him to be QB2, that's a really scary proposition, right? But if you're throwing something out there, someone's like, you know what, I'm quitting on Phillip Rivers and I'm going to throw him out there. Just give me a third, especially like in the draft, especially in the drafts, as we're watching these names fall. Like, man, it's 303 and Antonio Gandy Golden's still out there. Man, Denzel Mims, he just went in the fourth round to, Arizona, and he's still on the board. Like, what? And all of a sudden you can play on that, not hysteria, but that hype to some degree if that becomes the case. So yesterday's mock with the dummies with the dynasty dummies really opened my eyes to that, man. Even in a 14-team league, 28 guys deep in Superflex, you still have a lot of players on the board that a lot of people are stands for who will likely pay something. So at that point, you might even be able to get Phillip Rivers and a 2021 second, third on top of it if someone's really feeling froggy and wants a player. So yeah, I like that a lot. That makes sense, Josh.
So we talked about the QBs, and tomorrow we're probably going to see some quarterbacks get franchised or transitioned. That window opens tomorrow. And are there any guys that you are interested in seeing if they will be franchised or hit with the transition tag?
The two I'm most interested in are Tannehill and Jameis, because I think those two are going to show us what's happening in the QB market, and that's going to be it's either going to be super boring or super exciting, I think, because if both those guys get franchise, then I think that there's going to be so much less movement than everybody expected at the beginning of the season, or beginning of the off season. And but if they let both those guys go, I mean, it's going to be mass chaos, and it's going to be beautiful.
What about you, J. Mike?
I think the most interesting one for me resides in Dallas, because what happens with Dak directly affects Amari Cooper. So I find the proposition of, for whatever reason, if Jerry Jones screws this up and is not able to bring both of them back, I really find, however that shakes out, to be the most intriguing thing for me. I still think Tom Brady goes back to New England. I don't really think much of that, but Dak's the one. Dak's the really interesting piece among all this, because we think that he's coming back to Dallas one way or the other. The question is, do they just get a deal done, or are they going to have to slap the tag on him? And that could ring really, really heavy with how we look at the rest of that roster, because we know Amari is a huge difference maker in that offense.
And I agree with you, J. Mike, for a slightly different reason, though. I think it's Dak. And I actually don't think there's a more interesting story when we talk about the franchise and the transition tag, just because, and this is just a feeling, there have been no articles written about this. There's been no rumors about this. I think Dak will feel really disrespected if he is hit with the franchise tag and he's not given
No question.
And he's not hit with a long-term deal. I mean, he's been playing on his rookie contract, making less money than guys that you've seen in the offseason that don't even make teams. And if he has to make, I think for quarterbacks, the franchise tag is over $28 million. I may be slightly off on that number, but I think that's the number. And he's looking for something in the $33 to $35 million range. I actually wouldn't be surprised, and like I said, this is just a feeling, if he didn't sit until he got the contract that he wanted. And I mean, Dallas should give it to him. That's not even a point that should be argued. But if Jerry and Dak's representatives can't get a deal made and he thinks he's just going to franchise tag him, I think that could actually end up bad for both sides and hurting the Dallas Cowboys team. So, yeah, I mean, we got some good ones here. I mean, Dak, Amari, Tannehill is a real interesting one. We are going to see. So it's actually $27 million for the franchise quarterback. So a little bit less than I thought it was. So, that makes that discrepancy just a little bit more. And, like I said, I think Dak would actually sit until he got what he wanted. And I don't think too many people could blame him. But as we transition to what we've seen on the timeline, talking about things that we want, this is the time of year where, many of us are interested in joining more leagues. I know Bill and I were talking about a couple leagues that we're going to be a part of. I know that J. Mike is a part of many, many leagues. And, I have friends that ask me about leagues all the time. Well, if you're looking at maybe taking over an orphan, check out Safe Leagues. They have teams at all prices. And the cool thing is, on their site, you can see all of the information about the team and the league before you make a decision. If you're looking for a team heavy in those 2020 first round picks, everyone talks about it. Everyone wants 2020 first round picks. They're gold right now. You can check out the team and see if they have one or more of those picks. If you're looking for a team that maybe has a better roster, you could do that as well. So go to safeleaguesfantasy.com/orphans and type in the promo code timeline. That's safeleaguesfantasy.com/orphans. and type in the promo code timeline. You'll be in a well-run league, and that helps us out too. So now that we did that, we're going to talk about some of the stuff we saw on the timeline, and I'm glad we got J Mike here, because J Mike always is just always so well informed and always has great insight into all of these things. So the first one is from Michael Appel at Michael Appel 18. So this was actually a comment that was left on a thread that you started, Bill, about trying to trade. I believe you're trying to trade the 103 for the 101 or something like that. I know I have the details of that off, but Michael said it looks like getting the 101 is going to be tough in any league. He offered the guy who has the 101 in his league the 2020 108, the 2020 110, and his first round picks in 2021 and 2022, and the guy wouldn't do it. So J Mike, I want to start with you. If you get that deal, you have the 101 and you would get the 108 and the 110 this year, plus a 2021 first and a 2022 first. Is that a deal you're doing?
At the moment, no. But a lot of that, and especially if I'm in a super flex league, the 101 is such a power play. It is such a power play. And that's one of the things that I learned from my first commissioner in a dynasty league, one John Bosch. John, he the way that he thinks about things is just so different than a lot of people. And one of the things that I remember him impressing upon me just in general conversation, the 101 is it allows you the flexibility to do a lot of different things that you want to do. And if you're even if you're in a position to rebuild, and let's just say that you earn the 101, then you can still do better, I think, than the 108 and the 110. And the first round picks in 21, 22 that we have no idea what it looks like, if the league's going to be there, any of those things. But even in the draft itself, or even shortly before the draft, once we see all these landing places and people get really excited, to be able to move out of one of those top quarterbacks or to be able to move out of one of those top running backs, if it's me, I'm not going to be one that is just leaving a lot of that space in that premium portion on the table. I want to be able to either leverage that for more higher end players, people that I really think can make a difference on my team, or if I'm getting picks, I need earlier capital than 108. And I really like a lot of the late first round, second round. I'm a fan of this draft a lot. And especially when you put names on paper, you're like, man, this is nice. But 101, the flexibility, the power play of it all, and the premium pick that it is, that's not enough for me to move the needle, really to move off of that pick.
So I agree with you, J Mike. And my thing is that, always, if you're going to trade, someone, especially something like a 101, get the max value for it. It's the same thing as AJ Brown right now. I feel that AJ Brown has such high value that if you're not maxing it out, you're not doing it right. It's the same with the 101. If you're rebuilding, you should be able to get a couple of young guys, maybe a stud and maybe a guy that you have a lot of faith in that you think is ready to come up, or maybe you drop to 103 and you get, another high impact piece. It's all about getting max value when you have assets like that, because honestly, you don't get assets like that all that often. You don't, how many times are you getting the 101? Hopefully not that many times, or you're not a very good player. So, especially in a draft like this one, where, like we were saying earlier, there's still, there's hypes on guys like Gandy Golden. There's hypes on guys like Denzel Mims. There's hype on guys like Eno Benjamin. And we're talking about third round guys, that the hype is real on. So if you have 101, I mean, in Superflex, it's Joe Burrow, and everyone knows it. But if Joe Burrow goes out there and he slings the ball and he just looks crisp, and he's hitting guys that he's never thrown to before, and all the buzz out of the combine is, look what a good job Joe Burrow did, that stock is going up. And as hard as that is to believe, it's going up. So J Mike, you're right. You got to cash in on that value. You have to get everything you can get out of it. And if 108 and 110 and 2 future picks probably isn't going to do it. So at that point, it might have to be 108 and a high impact young player to, get up to 101. What do you think, Bill?
So what started this out was I'm in a league where I made some trades where I ended up getting the 103 from someone else. And there's just not a lot of leagues that I like. The best pick I have this year that I earned was a 106. So it's like I don't have many options to get, or opportunities to get, like Burrow. And I want to get a share of Burrow. So it's like, okay, what do I have to do to get Burrow? And I had the 103, the 112, and the 203. And I think I offered the 103, the 203, and then like some veteran throw in. And so, I mean, do I have the assets there, do you think, J Mike, to move up?
I think I'm someone with the 6th pick that might entertain that. I find that interesting. I don't know now. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do it.
So I have the 103 in that league. I traded for it. So I have the 103, the 203, and the 112. That league I have the 112.
Oh, 112 now. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I thought you said you had the 103 and the 106 still. I was like, well, I don't know. Yeah.
So 103,
probably not.
Yeah, no, you wouldn't take like the 103, the 112 for it.
No, that second first, I like it to be earlier. Because at that point, again, depending on the league, but just as I lay it out in my head, we've got Burrow and we've got Tua, which gives you ideally your pick of the litter at one of the running back positions. Right. But the running back and I don't know, T. Higgins for me doesn't necessarily do it justice if Joe Burrow is who I think he is, or if Tua is who I think that he is. So maybe if you had 103 and I don't know, 107, something like that. And then all of a sudden, even the idea that Zach put in the chat there, talk about cascading picks, you could really do some fun things if you're okay with moving back in those premium spots. Do you have the ammo? Yes. My question would be, your target being Burrow, are you okay with missing out on your choice of whomever the running back is and whatever spot you love, and one of those really nice other players at the end of the first round? Are you good with that, Bill? That's the real question.
Yes. And the answer is absolutely yes, because I have, if you saw that team, you would be like, yeah, Bill, absolutely. Just do what you got to do. Like, I mean, if I have a loaded team, it went undefeated last year. So like my team is just loaded. So I can afford to make some risk plays, you know what I mean? And like that only position I'm light on is quarterback, and I have Mahomes and Garoppolo. And then nothing. So so that's kind of where I am. So I'm thinking, why not just pay up and get it? And I was trying to get it cheap, I guess, obviously by that offer, but maybe I can throw him like I don't know, what kind of wide receiver could I throw in? Like I have, like, okay, how about this? Does Amari get you 101 right now?
Straight up, probably not right now.
Yeah.
I mean, in theory, yes, but like, no, not right now.
I made that offer and it got denied.
Yeah.
So if I do like the 103 and I don't know, like Um,
Do you have somebody like Cortland Sutton? Does 103 and Cortland Sutton get you 101?
I don't know if I could do that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
How
I
bad
don't
you
know
want
if I
that
want to do
quarterback,
that.
Bill?
The-
How
That's a
bad
good
that
question.
quarterback, Bill?
I mean, how about yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I have the right assets to hammer him with a good wide receiver.
Who do you have? Name off who you have.
Okay, well, my starting line is Mahomes and Garoppolo, McCaffrey and Barkley,
Oh my gosh.
Miles Sanders, Godwin, Devontae, Tyreek, Amari, and Kittle. So my backup running
so
backs
gross.
are carry on, and then I have Debo, Deontay, Anthony Miller, Juju is on my bench. Preston.
What? Who are you in this league with?
So I got super lucky, like in the startup when I drafted a bunch of quarterbacks that weren't starting that ended up hitting, including Mahomes, and just a lot of guys that ended up being starters. And this was one of those leagues where the guys they weren't super aggressive with drafting quarterbacks, and John Hogue talking about, hammer quarterbacks. That's what I did. And then I just started making trades, and it just ended up, everything worked for me. Because I drafted so many bad quarterbacks that weren't playing to start, I ended up getting first pick overall the next year and got Barkley. And then, so it just kind of, I was super lucky in that league. It wasn't like these people were idiots. It just ended up, everything worked out. Like sun was shining perfectly for me.
So Bill,
Debo in the 103. Does that work? Is that not enough?
I love Debo, and I don't think that's enough.
God,
I'm like,
I'd be
probably
okay
the
offering
biggest
it, though.
Debo fan.
I'd be okay offering that.
Yeah. I mean, maybe I'll do that.
So Zach wrote something in the chat that I think is interesting. Would you consider taking Herbert at 103 and calling it a day?
Well, with this team, I would consider it, just because I'm pretty good. But I mean, it's hard to pass up like the number one running back in whoever that is. I don't know yet, but.
And by the way, in Superflex leagues, I think by the time the majority of us are doing rookie drafts, Herbert will be the 103. And I fully feel that by the time this process, and I already see it kind of happening, he's starting to climb up there. You're starting to hear stories that, Miami would be very happy to take him at 5 if they can't do a move up scenario and ensure themselves Tua. And a lot of other just reports and rumors and things that I've heard, it sounds like the league as a whole is starting to kind of get behind Herbert. And I think by the end of it, when we're doing our Superflex rookie drafts, we're going to be seeing Herbert at the 103.
Dilly.
So we got that one out of the way. Mike, I hope that kind of helped you out. We got next one here from Jacob Vines at jsnake_DFF. So he has a poll here. Which side would you want in a Superflex tiered PPR dynasty league with 0.1 points per carry for running backs? So, we were talking about Cam earlier. So the package of Marcus Mariota, Duke Johnson, and the 2020 204, or Carolina quarterback Cam Newton. What do you think, J. Mike?
Cam, Teddy Cam for me. Oh yeah, Cam Newton, man. Yeah, give me Cam. And listen, I like Mariota. I like Duke Johnson, and again, I've said enough about what I think about this draft in the second round, but specifically for what we said, we think Cam Newton can be, whether he's on your team for 2 seasons or whether he's on your team for the next 8, whatever that looks like. The asset that Cam is just much greater. And I think the height of what he brings you is much greater than the package. So give me Cam, and I'm not looking back. I'm hitting accept on that rather swiftly.
By the way, J Mike, I need to record that and make your singing voice my ringtone because that was beautiful. I agree with you. However, I won't sing because my voice is nowhere near as good as yours. So it's Cam, and I don't think it's close. Personally, if we look at the percentages here, 54.5 for Cam, 32 for the package, and then 13.5% said it was an even trade. I don't think it's an even trade, and I think it is Cam. And it's actually not close because we don't know where Mariota is going to end up next year. It's most likely going to be in a backup role. So unless he was kind of watching Ryan Tannehill and he can copy what Ryan did to steal a starting quarterback's job, I think Marcus Mariota is going to be a backup in 2020. Duke Johnson.
That pains. That hurts, man. You just saying that sentence cut me so deep as someone who's such a big fan of Mariota, man. That golly.
Listen, I live right outside of Philly, and you should have heard what this fan base wanted to do. They wanted to trade every pick for the next 3 drafts to move up to get Marcus Mariota. We had, the Eagles had Chip Kelly at the time. So they were looking at the reunion. They were like Chip Kelly and Marcus Mariota, and we're winning championships, and we're going to be the best team ever. Just give us Marcus Mariota. So while, I wasn't on that bandwagon, I totally understand because there were a lot of my close friends who literally were trying to see if they could trade cousins and uncles and whatever else they had to in order to get Marcus Mariota in a green Eagles jersey. So, it cuts a lot of people deep that had the belief in him. But at this point, he's a backup quarterback until, he proves otherwise. Duke Johnson, I watched Duke Johnson play and I go, wow, he's really talented, but then I see the numbers he puts up in fantasy and I go, it's okay, and then the 204, like you said, it's a deep draft, and I think there are going to be guys that you get in the 3rd and maybe even 1 or 2 guys that you can get in the 4th round of a rookie draft this year that are going to impress and are going to make you very happy if you draft them. But in my mind, again, this is kind of, when I was playing devil's advocate for Phillip Rivers, if Cam's foot heals and he's back to the Cam of old, again, this is a QB2, and I think one of the higher end QB2s, and I don't think you trade that away for a package of hopes and dreams. What do you think, Bill?
Yeah, I think I agree. I'm on the Cam side, but I think it's a little closer than you guys. I think that the 204 might almost get you Cam at draft time. So that's kind of my only thought. I think there's people out there that value him very little, especially let's say that maybe they choose to just move on from him this year. People are going to freak out around draft time, freak out that he doesn't have a team yet. So that'd be my one thing, is that the package might have more value, but who would I rather have? I might prefer to save the 2 roster spots and go with Cam.
So Jacob, we hope that helps you out. This was a real interesting one that you threw on here, Bill. So John Bosch, we probably all know who he is if you're listening, at John Bosch FF, posted a spreadsheet with where he thinks players will be a year from now and he says that helps him figure out which players he wants to trade for this year. How do you go about kind of figuring out which players you want to trade for and you know, try to get those guys early? And I'm really interested in both your processes, Bill and J Mike, because I don't really have a process, so I'll be curious to see what you guys do.
Bill, you want first? You want honors here?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Easily one of the best parts of hosting a podcast and being a part of the Dynasty community is I get the absolute privilege of picking the brains of so many stinking smart people. Even further than that, being a part of the DFPN, the network, as we call it, being a part of the Dynasty Dummies even before we had a network. I'm just able to pick the brains of and talk shop with people who have perspectives that are different from mine, who are much more experienced to some degree. And a lot of the things that I like to do now specifically is my process has changed quite a bit in the 3 years now that I've done Dynasty. So once upon a time, it was these are players that I like, who I've watched in college, because I used to watch a ton of college football when I had the opportunity, and I'd be able to pick and choose and look at rankings and follow a lot of what the fantasy footballers said, and Matthew Berry and Christopher Harris and all these big names. And as I've gotten further into it, I've been able to refine my process quite a bit in that I'm doing my own scouting. I'm picking the brains of, again, smart people who aren't just looking at the film, but are also bringing us fantastic data, whether that be Peter Howard, whether that be Jesse Reeves, whether it be Kyle LeBrecq. The list goes on and on. RotoViz, you can list so many people. So that's become part of my process, but also being able to check out the Dummy Blitz, being able to do the Dummy Blitz. I'm watching a ton of these games as well on Game Pass. So I'm able to see different situations, people perform or underperform with fantastic situations or with really crappy situations. And I'm able to put all of these pieces together. And oftentimes, I don't tend to be someone who wants to trade the farm for one player. And that might be to my detriment, because depending upon the roster size, one of the things that I've learned, again, this is also from John Bosch, but also Scott Connor over at Dynasty and Chill. A lot of it is going to depend upon how many people are you starting, how many people can you put into your lineup, what are the scoring settings, all of those things. So now I've got sheets and I've got lists set up where it's a case I'm going in, I'm looking at my settings every year, and I'm trying to see what does my team look like now, and then what also basically am I liking according to the actual setup, and then trying to match that up with ADP and what people are saying as being undervalued assets, and trying to attack those things, because I'm a huge fan of being able to leverage the whatever the fine line is of the edge in your leagues. And I think a lot of that can be had with finding assets or basically people with opportunities who haven't necessarily broken out yet, but also looking at the things that people aren't super thrilled about in league. So yes, Superflex does cater to an additional QB, but what happens if you're in a Superflex league that also is tight end premium, like a Trade Addicts league where the premium's heavy, and you only have to start one of each position? All of a sudden, having 3 and 4 running backs who can tote the rock and do fantastic things doesn't mean the same thing when I have a bunch of different ways of filling these flex spots where tight ends are premium, where we get points per reception and all these things. So a lot of it for me, and it almost feels like a cop-out answer, but I hope that I explained that well enough to where, from a process standpoint, a lot of what I'm looking for caters to my leagues. And I'm not looking to try to pay up for these assets. I want to be able to see what's next, because what's next and trying to find what's next in terms of the value is so much easier and lends itself to more success for me than trying to go out and pay for what's now. And your Phillip Lindsay's, he blew up and people were giving up the farm to try to be able to get Phillip Lindsay. Yep. And the list goes on and on for those types. So that's my, that's my 2 cents on that.
Yep. That's for me, I do something very similar to what John does. It's 3 years ago, I want to say, like, what I basically just did is I went through that down ADP, and I kind of picked out the guys that I thought would outperform what ADP is right now. Now the last couple of years I have been doing kind of what John does, and I set up a spreadsheet thinking about where those guys are going to be, at the end of the season. And, it does help. It definitely helps. And, it was really cool of him to share that with, everybody on Twitter to kind of get an idea that it just helps people to think. There's a lot of times people are just thinking about who's in the news right now, and then the whim of like this news gets somebody excited and they overpay for something where, you got to pay attention to situations, so I'm looking at contracts, I'm looking at who's leaving it, from those positions from that team, for certain players.
So, like I said, I don't have a process per se, but J Mike, you touched on it a little bit. Twitter is an invaluable tool if you are following the right people. And you ran off some names, Peter Howard, Jesse Reeves, Ray JQ. I mean, the list goes on and on. I could probably do a whole hour show just on the really smart people that I follow on Twitter. But I kind of look at players that these guys are talking about, and then I kind of go off and I do my own research. I try to look up scouting reports. I try to find non highlight videos on the web, whether it's YouTube or it's something else. And then I kind of just make a list of my guys, and I go from there. Last year I was big on Debo, and I was big on Irv Smith, who I am also big on this year. I'm trying to get Irv Smith everywhere I can. He's a guy I believe in. He's a guy that has the athletic profile that I think will establish him as a top flight tight end within the next year or two. So it's kind of, like you said, you guys have spreadsheets and you guys are watching games and stuff like that. And I kind of go to smart people that I follow and smart people that I know, and I take their opinion, and then I kind of go to the next level, and I try to do as much research on those guys as possible to see if they are guys that I like or not. So I'm probably not as advanced as Bill and J Mike are, but that's kind of my very very small process. Bill's over here laughing.
Well, the beauty of it is though, like everybody starts obviously with whatever works for them, and then we just build out from there, right? So no matter how simple or succinct or how non-refined you feel like your process is, obviously you're still gleaning and learning every day. So I think that's the main thing, is that not being satisfied with thinking that you know everything, because newsflash, just in case you were curious, you don't have all the answers, dear listener. So whomever you are, always be looking out for more information to be able to help you get an edge, because at the end of the day, the edge is what helps us in these leagues, and it helps us be able to get where we want to be, which is in the winner's circle. So I think from a process standpoint, I don't think it has to be something that's super complex in the least bit to work for whomever is leveraging it. So yeah, I still dig what you've got going on, Josh.
Yeah, when I was laughing at a comment in our chat about my coughing fit that I just had, where I had to stop speaking. So I wasn't laughing at your process, my man. No, yeah, it's like, my former life, I was an auditor, so spreadsheets are like probably the closest thing I have to a brother. And so I spend, some quality time with my spreadsheets. And so that's how I feel comfortable kind of doing my thing, So, But we all have our process. You just figure out what works for you, and that's just fun to me. So I like projecting. I like thinking about it. We all have an illness, right? If we're doing a podcast about dynasty football in February, talking about the combine, we all have some level of sickness and OCD about this game that we play. So it's just however you enjoy it, and how if you feel like what you're doing is effective, go for it, and stick to it.
For sure. So we got one last let's try this again. One last question here, and this is coming from Nick at NShowShow36. He's rebuilding his team. It's a 12-team non-superflex. What side would you take? DJ Chark and Miles Sanders, or Aaron Jones, Devin Singletary, and a 2021 second round pick? I'll let you guys go first because I have my opinions on this.
I'm really curious of the price right now, specifically of Devin Singletary. I don't know exactly where he lands in the landscape. So, what I likely want is the DJ Chark Miles Sanders side. My Jaguars fandom obviously rises here, but also keeping in mind, I think that if I get Miles Sanders, I think that I can flip him and get even more than any of these single pieces that are on the board. So I think that I take the highest valued asset in Miles Sanders, and it gives me DJ Chark, who's a potential wide receiver to build around on my team too. I think Singletary is a good player. He's fine and all, and I think Aaron Jones obviously show what he can be in an offense. But I don't trust the Aaron Jones continuing to be that guy moving forward. And even if he is, as everyone has pointed out, I feel like every corner of Twitter, the touchdown regression, it tends to bite pretty heavy. So give me Chark and give me the piece that I think is the most valuable in this as well, in Miles Sanders. Again, Miles Sanders is a piece that, while I am totally okay with moving on from, considering that talk about believing people for who they show you to be. Doug Peterson, time and again, has showed us that he wants to invoke a committee there in Philadelphia, and he wants to be able to leverage multiple guys. So I'm okay with the Miles Sanders side. I actually like that quite a bit.
What about you, Bill?
I think values, I'm on the other side. Aaron Jones is about 12 spots up in ADP compared to Miles Sanders. So, can you trade those guys straight up right now? I think so. And I think I go Singletary in a second for Chark. I'm not sold on Chark yet. I don't even know what they're going to be doing this year. I don't know who the quarterback's going to be. I don't know what they're adding. I like Chark, but I'm just not sold yet. So I just feel value-wise, I'm going the other side. And I'd probably be moving all those guys as quickly as I could. And that's, that's basically where I'm at.
I almost feel like, though, you have to find the Aaron Jones truther, which there are many of them out there, to be able to move Aaron Jones right now with everyone screaming to sell Aaron Jones. I think Miles Sanders, you'll be able to find many more suitors, and I think that you can find a deal that you probably like more if the goal is to trade those guys,
sure.
which is what I would be looking for if I bring either of these sides on. Like I said, Chark is one that is the piece that I think that he showed so stinking well, and watching him live and in person when they played the Bengals this year, man. Chark's special, man. He's not the same dude that came out of LSU, and it's fun to watch. But I would think that trying to move Aaron Jones right now is a really difficult proposition. But I don't blame you there.
I'm actually with Bill here. Didn't know how this was going to line up, so it's good that me and my man are on the same side. I agree with a lot of what you said, J. Mike, about Aaron Jones, but I think you'll be able to sell somebody on the fact that he had how many touchdowns this year? 1 million?
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a Packer fan in every effing league I'm in. So
Yes.
like, I mean, that alone is another reason why it's not that hard to trade Aaron Jones.
So I think I think you will be able to find someone in your league that will give you some good value for Aaron Jones. I also agree with you, J. Mike. I've been struggling to put value on Devin Singletary. I listen to some people who say, this is the guy. He's going to be in there. He's the running back for the next 3 or 4 years for the Bills. And then I hear other people who say, they're going to have to, draft someone or get someone in free agency to have a running back by committee for him. He might be harder to sell, but I kind of like the talent. So if I couldn't turn him into something else, he's not someone that I would be mad is on my team. Mm-hmm. And then, the 2021 second is just kind of a little extra, seasoning on the deal. So I like that side, even though I wouldn't be mad with the Miles Sanders, DJ Chark side either. And the poll kind of bared that out. The Chark Miles Sanders side got 51.2% of the vote, while the Aaron Jones Singletary in 2021 second got 48.8% of the vote. So, almost 50-50 there. So, kind of like us.
You're right. And for those counting at home, Aaron Jones had 19 touchdowns last season, 16 of which were rushing. So he just got just over 1,000 yards rushing. He obviously had a fantastic season, but even with those guys, and obviously I'm not trying to sway you guys at this point. Obviously you've made your decision, but when we look at all these guys of this group specifically, I think Miles Sanders is the only person that has their arrow pointing up specifically in this group. I don't think that anybody is going to look at where the values currently are for all these guys and say, man, things are really trending in a way that works out for this player right now. Like, and I think that's one of the things that I like Miles Sanders, but I'm not as big of a, I'm not as into Miles Sanders. I think a lot of people are. But this is a fun trade. I'm glad you pulled this one. This is a really interesting one to toss about.
I saw it and I was like, it took me a while to actually vote on it because I did go back and forth because I agree with you with Miles Sanders. I think the arrow's pointing up. I watch every Eagles game just because I'm in the market. So I've seen Doug Peterson for the last 3 years, and Doug Peterson is a guy who likes to, share the ball. He doesn't like one running back doing it all. And I know you can kind of say the same thing in Green Bay with Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams, but I don't think Miles Sanders will ever be able to reach full potential because there will always be a Jordan Howard or a Boston Scott or, 2 or 3 other guys. He actually kind of reminds me a little bit of Bill Belichick in the way he uses running backs. Kind of when you think you have the guy who's going to go off, all of a sudden, you're starting Miles Sanders and Boston Scott is having a time. So,
Yeah.
So.
I mean, my whole day, typically when I trade, I'm trading for what I feel is a top value. So especially this time of year. But if you were going to ask me which assets I want on my roster entering the season, probably my answer is different. So it's not like it's this huge difference, but it is a really good trade for sure. And honestly, a lot of those guys I don't even want on my roster. So
Right.
I think Singletary might be the only guy that I'm probably higher on than most, and so that kind of pushes me that way. But I'm not crying if I'm including those pieces in any trade.
Yeah.
Can I sneak a question in before you close down the shop?
Do it,
Josh. I'm curious of your all's perspective. So of the 2019 rookies, these guys that we just watched do work, who's the guy that you're hot to trot after in this offseason?
So
Like I'm trying to go get this guy anywhere and everywhere I can.
I'm usually the guy that's after those second-year receivers. So I'm going after the guys who didn't quite pop but showed, last year. So Deontay Johnson's my guy. Like I'm always
Yes.
like he is the guy that I'm going to try to add to every team I own. Deontay and then like Mecole, just those kind of guys that have shown something that I feel their volume's going to go up next year. Or Deontay, man, I mean, he's going to play the AB role. He's not AB, but like I could see it with a quarterback that can, be reasonably accurate and put some velocity on it. I mean, that's pretty exciting to me.
I agree with both of Bill's choices, but the guy I really want is the guy who kind of showed out already, and it's Deebo Samuel. And it's just because I was so high on him going into rookie drafts last year, and I got him in a lot of places, but those places that I wasn't able to get him in, I want him. He kind of reminds me of a Tyreek Hill light in the fact that they like using him on the end rounds. They like using him, all over the field, all kinds of different routes running. He kind of does everything on the field. And I like guys who can do it all. And I think Deebo is one of those guys that can do it all. And, I already hear some people saying, Kyle Shanahan wants to use Dante Pettis more.
What's his price?
Jalen Hurd is coming, is going to come back. I like this from Zach. Tyreek Hill heavy, not Tyreek Hill light. So I will change that up and I will call him Tyreek Hill heavy. But I think they've already seen what Deebo can do in that offense. And this was just year one. I think he's just going to keep getting better. So, and he's my guy. He's, Irv Smith is another guy. He didn't show out, but he's another guy that I had. I was really behind last year. Obviously, I didn't like the landing spot because Kyle Rudolph being there in Minnesota, but I think that's going to switch relatively quickly as soon as this year, possibly. And we're going to see him ball out. So those are the two guys that I would really want to go after.
Nice.
How about you?
It's definitely Deontay. Deontay and Mecole, love both of those guys. Deontay last season, and I think in all the games, and I'm again in my deep research, heavy on the quotation marks there. My deep research for last year, yeah. my spreadsheets where I was keeping track of top 36 finishes. I believe he, James Washington, and Juju Smith-Schuster all had 5 top 36 finishes, which I found to be interesting. And just being able to watch him on a week-to-week basis, if he's going to be the one that's operating and they're running around all over the place, specifically out of the slot, I love what he offers to that offense. Big plays, and Mecole Hardman, obviously, opportunity galore in Kansas City. But the other guy that I find really intriguing right now, if I'd have just listened to Jake Anderson up front when it comes to DK Metcalf, I really enjoyed watching him this season.
For sure.
I enjoy what he can continue to become. And it could get really gross for people trying to guard him for the next decade. That guy.
I mean, he's Dez, right? Like, he's basically Dez, like,
but bigger.
Yeah.
Like bigger and faster. And
yeah.
And scarier.
But that's the way he's going to play. He's going to be like super Dez.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun to watch. And with Russell Wilson as the quarterback, the next handful of years could just be really, really fun to watch.
And it's funny that, you said Deontay J. Mike, because while I don't remember exactly what episode it was one of our first handful of episodes. Bill and I were talking about Deontay and the stats that he was putting up, and no one talks about him. You don't really hear people talk about Deontay, And I think he's a guy that put up decent stats last year, and you could still get him at wide receiver that didn't really do much last year prices. And it's crazy to me, but I really think you can get him cheaper than you should. I'll put it that way. And that is how I feel about that.
He led Pittsburgh in targets last year, which is so funny to even say.
Right.
On a team with James Conner and Juju Smith-Schuster, and everybody loves Vance Dance. Everybody wanted the James Washington second-year breakout. It was Deontay Johnson who led the team in targets. Anyway, I find that interesting.
So I'm looking at the DLF Trade Finder, and Deontay is going for like a second-round pick, and then I mean, it doesn't say what pick at that point when the trades were made, but that Debo is like a first and a second. So I mean, I think value-wise, it's just so incredible the difference there.
Right.
Like it's worth me rolling the dice on Deontay in most leagues over Debo. I mean, Debo's already got that value bump,
Yeah, I mean, and some of that I think also helped. Some of that was due to the fact that he made the Super Bowl.
Sure. Yep.
We got to see him. We got to see him the last month of the season, kind of in games by himself. We weren't flipping to other games, and we kind of were able to see what he was doing in that offense and really going. So with that last question, we're out of here. J Mike, I want to thank you. I'm going to tell a short little story. When I first got into Dynasty, I was trying to find podcasts and find people to listen to. And someone said, "Oh, do you watch the Open Bar?" And I go, "What's the Open Bar? I don't know what the Open Bar is." And, "Oh, dude, you got to watch it." And from the first episode, I was like, I need to get onto an episode of this show one day. And B, if I ever have the chance to talk to J Mike, I am going to do it. So I appreciate you coming out, because kind of, there are a handful of people that I want to get on here. You were at the top of the list, and I appreciate you coming on. You are not only on the Open Bar, you're everywhere else. And I'll let you shout that all out in a minute. And, just thank you. Appreciate it. You always, you always look at things in such a way, and you always have the knowledge to back it up. So J Mike, thank you.
Man, that's that's super humbling, man. Thank you. I appreciate the kind words. Truly, Josh. The Open Bar is the place that I get to call home with my co-host Gabe Gearing, Tuesday nights, 9:30 p.m. Eastern ish. Heavy on the ish. We have a good time with it, but the show's handles on Twitter at the Open Bar Pod, and again, we tend to bring on typically about 3 guests to be able to chop it up with, talk fantasy, talk life, talk whatever that comes up, to be able to enjoy it. It's for the heaviest of hitters in fantasy football, and it's for the folks who are just arriving as well. We like to cater and be the place that everyone can come and feel welcome and enjoy themselves and laugh a lot and do random silly things like draft soups or talk about how we're sponsored by Skyline Chili whiskey, and that isn't really a thing, but we have a ton of fun with it. Exactly right. So it's fun to be able to do that. I love Gabe. That's my brother, my little brother down there, and I love to be able to do life with him in that. Also part of the Dynasty Dummies, along with doing some things in the background for them. Just a minute with J Mike is always fun to be able to do, as well as the Dummy Blitz, which right now, with it being the off season, trying to figure out how exactly to incorporate that well. But that's 15 minutes of bringing you what happened throughout the week, specifically in games, watching a lot of the games, so you don't have to bring you a quick snippet of things that matter from a fantasy perspective. So those are a lot of the endeavors that I have right now, and I'm just grateful to be a part of it all, and grateful to be with you guys. And Josh, we're well overdue on having you on the open bar. And I know, Bill, we were supposed to record Tuesday, but sadly life got in the way of that. So again, that definitely got to have you guys on. But again, thank you for allowing me to come on to this adventure that you all are starting, because it's fun to be able to watch you guys grow. Watch this be something that you were both kind of nervous and tepid about, and all of a sudden you're starting to let your light shine a little bit brighter, which is so much fun to be able to watch you guys progress. So I'm humbled. Thank you, very much. Thank you, and grateful for the time.
And one more thing, one thing you didn't mention, J Mike, J Mike's journal. I know that's a thing that you're kind of doing on the side. I listened to episode 1. It's it's not a football thing, but just listen. It's life. It's interesting, and a lot of the stuff that you said in episode 1 is stuff that has run through my mind before, and stuff that maybe I've thought about in the past or I'm currently thinking about. And it's really cool when you see, fantasy guys, and I'll put that dynasty guys, I'll put that in air quotes, doing something that's different, doing something that isn't classified as that. And, J Mike's journal, if you haven't listened to it, I'm going to tell you right now, it's not a fantasy thing. It's not a dynasty thing, but it's a really cool thing. It's a real interesting thing. And, J Mike, if you want to put some other words on it, you can, but I just wanted to shout that out because I listened to episode 1 and I was blown away. I'm not even going to lie. I was listening to it at work and I was just blown away. It was amazing. So.
Yeah. And I appreciate the kind words with that. I try not to trumpet that too much, just because I say that it's definitely not for everyone, but it's certainly for everyone. And with that, I'm 2019. Quick background on that. I'm sorry to talk
Take
so
your
much.
time.
Keep going. Keep going.
Yeah. 2019 was not my finest year. It was a lot of hurt and heartbreak and frustration, and it's a lot of loss and all sorts of things. So I originally just got started to journal as a part of something that my counselor said would likely be something that would help me kind of get through and get past some things. And I also thought, like, in the midst of that, like, man, like as I'm writing, like, I'm not alone. Like, we're not alone in this thing that we call life. And as much as we say fantasy football isn't like that's still a part of everyone's real life. Like, it's a nice outlet, but it's still, you still put a lot of time and energy. So it's a part of your life. And so I wanted to be able to give people an idea as to the things that I'm struggling with, the things that I'm walking through and going through. And I want people to be encouraged to recognize that you're not by yourself in those struggles. You're not by yourself in those times where you're feeling really low and feel like you're not worth much. And I wanted to be able to put that on paper to help people along and encourage and hopefully give some perspective to people. So yeah, it's on Twitter at J Mike's Journal. I've really been fighting with entry too, because I haven't wanted to write it, but I started that, and yeah, we'll see what comes out. And again, just to be able to encourage and give perspective. So I appreciate people checking that out if they want to, and if you don't, God bless you. Keep it moving. It's all good. I don't wish any bad on anybody. So, but thank you for that, Josh. I do appreciate that.
Absolutely. So, as we get out of here, I just want to say, Bill and I, we thank you guys. Zach was in the live stream chatting it up. I saw some other people coming in and out. If you're listening to us on podcasts and maybe you just want to watch the replay on YouTube, we're on there at the Fantasy Timeline. Just type that into the search bar and you'll see this episode and all of our past episodes. Subscribe, hit the bell so you know when we go live. We really appreciate all of that, And if you're listening to us on the podcast, just make sure you hit that subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to us on. And if possible, give us a rate and review. If you got some friends you that are looking for some new Dynasty stuff to listen to, some new fantasy stuff to listen to, drop our name. We're everywhere. So if you can't find us on one place, you can probably find us everywhere else. So on that note, again, J Mike, we appreciate it. Bill, we're out of here.
Late.